to the CDG BizCast. I'm your host, Christian Gonzalez, co-owner of Creativity Design Group, a digital marketing firm in Houston, Texas. Time management is a vital skill that everyone in the business world must master, whether it be top-level executives or first-time startup owners. Managing time properly can be extremely daunting for many people, but it doesn't have to be. That is where Time Boss steps in, a framework built on several easy-to-implement habits to manage your time. Time Boss founder Andrew Hartman joins us today to discuss a few strategies to help you manage your time properly in order to reduce the stress and anxiety that comes with time management. He will also describe his journey as an entrepreneur that led him to form such a valuable company that the entire business world can greatly benefit from. Welcome to BizCast, Andrew. It's a pleasure to have you here today.
Hey, Christian. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yes, we are more than happy to have you on today's episode because our listeners are going to benefit greatly from learning more about what Time Boss does, how it can help them make their everyday lives more efficient, and of course, learn some valuable entrepreneurial advice from you, from your journey. So please share with us your story. Why did you start your own company, Time Boss, and what was your overall inspiration to join the world of entrepreneurship?
Yeah, that's a great question, Christian. Thank you so much. Appreciate the question. Yes, Time Boss was not anything I envisioned as a great idea to launch a business. Really, it came out of my own experience of time management, working as a executive in early stage software companies where I was totally overwhelmed and my teams were overwhelmed, lots of stress, lots of anxiety, lots of burnout. And I was actually a COO, so chief executive or chief operating officer, I should say. So I was responsible for operations, for resource management. And I'm looking at myself burning out and I'm looking at others burning out and I'm thinking, this is silly. Why are we doing it this way? Like, we are burning too bright. We're burning too hot. There's got to be another way. And that led me towards first solving time management for myself, finding a way to deal with the reality of those environments where we did need to execute. We did need to deliver exceptional results, but we had to do it in a way that was sustainable for myself and for my teams. And through lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of iteration, we ultimately built out what is now the Time Boss framework. And it allowed us to make tremendous contribution to the goals we were after without burnout, anxiety being part of that equation. My team started doing it as well. As individuals would move on from my teams or I would change companies, I would have individuals reach out to say, hey, whatever we were doing at that last company, would you be willing to come coach us on that over here? And it was this really interesting moment for me where I'm like, oh, that's interesting that this is more universal than just my teams. And that just kept happening. And eventually I had a buddy who encouraged me to launch a coaching group to see if I could do it with more individuals at the same time and to increase the impact, increase the accountability that comes from coaching groups. And that's where Time Boss was born. So it wasn't my original intent. If you had asked me 5 years ago, I would have told you I was going to be a early stage software executive the rest of my life. But I had a buddy who once said, sometimes you have to ride the horse in the direction it's going. And this just took off and I decided to roll with it. And it's just been a joy to help equip individuals and teams with a sustainable time management framework where they can get the results they want without anxiety and burnout being a part of that equation.
A very innovative concept indeed. I do feel that it is a framework that everybody in the business world can truly benefit from. Please tell our listeners more about Time Boss and how they can benefit from it specifically, especially small business owners and those who are looking to become business owners for the first time or first-time startup owners.
Yeah, so the primary benefit, I think, for anyone, whether you're a small business owner or if you're thinking about it, is that there's just so much to do when you are a small business owner or thinking about heading that direction. So prior to this, my wife and I actually also owned a few franchises in the Orange County area here in California. And I just know it. I know the feeling. I know what it means when you have so much to do, way more to do than you have time to do it. It can be a very overwhelming feeling and it can freeze you. You're not sure what to do next. There's so many things to do, so it's hard to know what to do next. And so what Time Boss does is it really makes time management 2 simple habits. It's a weekly planning meeting where you are doing the work to plan for your future self. That's where the word Time Boss comes from. You're literally the boss of your future self. You're putting on your boss hat and you're thinking about your future self like an employee on your team and thinking what that person needs to be successful. So weekly planning meeting is the first habit. And then the second habit is a daily review meeting. A daily review meeting, once you've made the plan, a daily review meeting is how you stay committed to that plan. And the power of the weekly planning meeting is really this. It's taking all those things, getting everything out of your head, all the things that you have to do as a small business owner, or if you're thinking about launching a business, all the things you need to launch a business, getting getting those to a single list, putting them in priority order, because the reality is at 8 a.m. on Monday, you can only do one thing at a time. And so one of those things is going to win. So in your weekly planning meeting, you're simply deciding ahead of time, what are the priorities here? And you can use any prioritizing framework you want, Eisenhower matrix, whatever, anything you like, you can prioritize with. But the work to be done is to prioritize. Once you prioritize, the next step is to really break those items down into 1 to 4 hour tasks to make them really actionable. And this is what a lot of people don't do. They'll make a to-do list, they'll prioritize it, and then they'll just be overwhelmed by that to-do list because it's so long and they're not sure what to do next. And they end up procrastinating. Procrastinating isn't a character issue. It's often an emotional issue. It's, I don't know what to do next. I feel frozen. So in lieu of doing anything, I'm just going to avoid it and go do something else. And so the power of, once you have that prioritized list, breaking it down to 1 to 4 hour tasks, you are creating these manageable chunks of progress. Think of it like, instead of looking at a marathon as the 20 some miles that I have to run, I'm looking at it in 1 mile increments. I can wrap my head around how to run 1 mile. So it makes it much more manageable, and it makes it really effective at helping me manage progress. I can see I've now ran a mile, I've now ran 2 miles, and that's really helpful and motivating to keep me in the game. And so when we take our priorities and we break them down into those 1 to 4 hour tasks, we're doing the very same thing. We're creating these manageable chunks that help us understand progress and feel really actionable. So I know what to do next. So once I have those down to manageable chunks, now the work to be done is to figure out when I'm going to do those things. And this is, again, another place where people fall down, is they don't decide on the front end how much of their life they're willing to give to their small business. And this is a weird thing. You know, sometimes you hear a small business owner, it's all consuming, I'm always busy, it's every hour of the day. And that might be true. You know, it comes down to your values if you want that to be true or not. You know, for me, I'm also a small business owner, and I also have kids, and I also have a wife that I love, and I also have a community that I'm involved in, a church I want to volunteer at. There's a number of things in my world besides just being a small business owner. And so the work to be done, in my opinion, is to decide how much of my life am I willing to give to work. It's a real question, right? Because if you look at last week, you gave some amount of your life to your business and you didn't give it to other things. You can only do one thing at a time. So maybe your small business got 40 hours or 60 hours or 80 hours or every waking hour you had. The key thing here is that it's your choice. We decide. It is up to us how much of our life we're going to give that business. I'm simply saying you can decide. And so for me, I have capped what I call income generating activities for my business at 50 hours. I'm going to do that 50 hours a week. And after that, beyond 50 hours, I'm going to be with my family. I'm going to be with my kids. I'm going to be with my wife. I'm going to be in my community, in my church, whatever. What that forces me to do then, that becomes a constraint. That 50 hours is a constraint for me to decide what's going to fit within those 50 hours. And then we'll talk about in a second what we're going to do with the things that don't fit. So once you have that constraint set, let's say you decide 50 hours like me, or you could decide 40 or 20 or 60. It's really up to you. You're in full control of your life. Once you decide that, the next key action is to factor in what I call whirlwind. And that's really just buffer time. And my recommendation is that people put between 10% and 40% of their week as buffer time, meaning they're very proactively not scheduling that time. The reason we do that is because of the chaos of the small business world. Emails, client calls, employee issues, water heater's going to break, shipment's not going to come in, emergency meeting's going to be called, website's going to go down, you name it. There's so many things that are coming to derail our plans. And if we don't prepare ourselves for those things, if we don't plan realistically, we just plan to fail. And we plan to really stress ourselves out and create a tremendous amount of anxiety. And so when we add that whirlwind time to our calendar, literally put it on your calendar, 10% to 40% of your week. So, you know, if you work 50 hours, 20% is 10 hours. So that'd be 2 hours a day. 40% is 4 hours a day. And that may sound like a lot of time, but I think if you experiment with it, you will see it's realistic. And there's a really profound thing that happens when you put in whirlwind time. And it's this: when you know you have time to deal with all the gotchas and the exceptions and the client calls and the website downs and all those things, you're much more likely to be committed to your priorities in all the rest of your time. So for me, I do 20% whirlwind, which means 80% of my time, I am locked in, dialed on my priorities, because I know I have that 20% buffer to deal with all these last minute items that are going to come in. And so I feel much less stress about those items. I'm much more likely to leverage that buffer, that whirlwind time, to get those items done. So again, backing us up, you now have everything out of your head into a list. You've prioritized that list. You've broken down that list in 1 to 4 hour tasks. You've determined how much you're going to work this week. You've added in realistic buffer to that schedule. Now you're going to go and simply take those 1 to 4 hour tasks and you're going to map them into your calendar. And you're literally just going to assign them time. If you think about it, your calendar is like a currency. There's only so much of it. You are finite. I only have 50 hours that I'm going to give to my income generating activities this week. That means I'm going to be loading in my calendar with my priorities. And certainly I'll have meetings and one-on-ones and all kinds of, doctor's appointments. There's going to be a lot of things that take my time, but there's only so much time. And eventually I am going to fill that calendar and there's going to be no more time. And that brings us to our next step. And this is where almost every time management, I actually haven't found a time management framework that deals with this well. And the step that I encourage people to take is to deal with the items that don't fit. So if you're a small business owner, you're probably laughing at me as you're listening to this podcast and saying, there's no way I can only work 50 hours. I just filled up my calendar and there's 20 hours left of things that I absolutely have to do next week. I totally get it. That's very real. That's my calendar too, as a small business owner. I'm simply saying you decide. So we just need to deal with those items. Can you delegate them? That's always an option. Can someone do it 70% as good as you? As you're growing your small business, you have to learn how to elevate and delegate to someone else. So can you delegate those items? Can you simply defer them? Once you get them in that list, I call it your backlog, that big list. If you don't work on it this week, can it just wait till next week? If so, you can work within your 50-hour boundary or whatever your boundary is, because you're going to be able to defer it. Could you digitize a task? Could you ask ChatGPT to do it for you? If you're writing job descriptions or you're writing marketing copy, there's a lot of things that AIs can now support us on, just small little tasks that can be really helpful. We're still in charge. We're still coordinating the work, but AIs can help us get that work done. Sometimes we just need to look at our list and say, is it actually valuable? Does it actually matter? Did I just collect this task because someone told me to do it, but it's not actually important? Maybe you just need to delete it. Maybe you just need to get it off your list. Or maybe you need to downsize it. Maybe you've put things on your calendar. You put a 4-hour task on your calendar, but the reality is you can get it done in 2 hours. There's a law, Parkinson's law, that says a task will fill the amount of time we give it. So if you give that task 4 hours, you're probably going to take 4 hours on it, but maybe you could do it in 2 hours. So you see, there's just lots of strategies to deal with the items that don't fit. That is the key. And you may get to it and you're like, you know what? I cut off 10 of the hours, but I still have to do 10. That's no problem. You decide and simply add 10 hours to your calendar, but you're in charge. Your work is not happening to you. Your small business is not happening to you. You are always responsible for your life. You're deciding how much of your time you're going to give to that business, and you're working it out with the stakeholders in your life. Don't do that in a silo. If you're married, talk to your spouse about that. Hey, I planned out my week this week and I got to work 10 extra hours. Could we find a time that's life-giving for you to me to do that work? Could I wake up early? Or can we get the kids down and then we'll do it late at night? Or your friends or your roommates or whoever that's going to impact, your church, if you're volunteering, talk with the stakeholders in your life where you're not just letting your business take over your world, but you're very thoughtfully deciding how much of your time you're going to give to that work. And then last step in that weekly planning meeting, just to round it out, is to commit to the plan. So you just did all this work to map out your calendar, to prioritize your time, to break it down to 1 to 4 hour tasks, to map those tasks into your calendar, to add whirlwind. You dealt with the items that don't fit. And now it really comes down to commitment. So you did all that work, you might as well be committed to it. So in this step, you're just ratcheting up your commitment to really follow through. And that's a couple ways. One, you look at that plan and make sure it's realistic. If you have no breaks or you have no lunches and there's no time for you to stand up to go to the bathroom or walk your dog or anything like that, you need to rework that plan. It's not a realistic plan. So when you commit to the plan, you're really working through that plan to make sure it's realistic, that you're going to have enough time and energy to make that thing happen. The second thing I encourage people to do is to actually send that plan to someone else. So we are 50% more likely to follow through on our plans if anyone else sees it. Even if they just see it, you could send it to your mom, you could send it to a friend. Doesn't matter if they have context about your world. If they see your plan, you knowing that they saw it, you're 50% more likely to follow through. If they know what you're up to, and if they can tell you if your plan is aligned or not to your goals, you are twice as likely to make that thing happen. So again, I am such a believer in commitment as a way to ratchet our intention to actually follow through. We did the work to make these plans, to make them realistic. It's a lot of work. A weekly planning meeting is an emotional exercise. But if you think about it, you're doing this on behalf of your future self. You're doing that work so that they don't have to. Once they show up, they can simply execute the plan once the week starts. And so, my encouragement for people is to wholeheartedly commit and get this plan on paper. So I'll take a breather, Christian. I know I just said a lot, but that's really the weekly planning meeting. It will change your life. It truly will. I've got 100 people from Time Boss cohorts this last year that can validate that. I've done it for the past, I've iterated so many times. Really, this version I've done for the past 5 years or so, and it has absolutely changed my life. And I think it can change any small business owner's life as well.
That is a very good way to help manage your time better, being able to break down certain tasks to get them down to a certain number. Yes, a lot of people do think that it's unrealistic to do that, but I have to disagree with them. I think that your idea of having these meetings is a good way to help sort things out, because otherwise, if you're not going through looking at each task and prioritizing them and ensuring that you put the most important ones at the top, you fall into the same trap that other small business owners end up falling into, and that's having this massive spaghetti bowl of chaos where they don't don't know what they're doing. They forget about certain tasks. They don't remember what needs to be done today or what needs to be done tomorrow, or they don't write anything down. They just expect to commit everything to memory, and then it ends up turning into a disaster for them. It basically turns into a tornado of time management chaos because they don't have anything organized. Now, I want to ask you an interim question here about myself, and I'm open to any feedback that you want to share. So in my case, I can say that 95% of my entire life since I've started CDG has been committed to business. I'm not married, I don't have any children, and it doesn't look like I'm going to be getting married anytime soon. That looks highly unlikely. So most of my life is pretty much business. I know it sounds kind of sad and pathetic, but it just is what it is. I don't really know what else to say about that. So in my case, what would you have to say about someone like me who commits 95% of his life just to business stuff?
I mean, first of all, Christian, I would say that's not sad at all. I mean, it's your choice, right? Like if that's the life you want to live, I mean, that's the thing where I say it's lots of time management frameworks break down into the amount of time you should work, but that's really not, I pass no judgment on every waking hour down to 1 hour a day. I mean, it really doesn't matter. So for me, my encouragement to you would to be one, kind of take ownership of that thought that I'm choosing my life. I'm 100% responsible for my life. And it sounds like you are, like the, 95% of your world is business. And then within that, really the two boundary conditions I would encourage you with is one being progress and one being peace. Progress is you deciding what are the goals that I'm trying to achieve? What are the outcomes that I'm trying to drive with my business? And that becomes a boundary condition for you. I want to organize my time, even if it's 95% of my waking hours, in such a way that where I'm going to make those outcomes happen. The other boundary condition I would give you, again, is peace. And that's that idea where you are driven by peace and freedom and clarity, not stress, anxiety, fear, anger, anything like that. So you're really self-regulating to say, I want to be so focused on the outcomes I'm trying to achieve, but I want to drive with peace, freedom, and clarity that I'm choosing this. I know my priorities. I'm getting after this. And you don't feel like you're breaking down day after day, week over week because of stress, fear, and anxiety. So again, there's no governor on total time there at all. The governor is really, are you hitting the outcomes you want? And are you doing so with peace, freedom, and clarity? That's really what I'm trying to help people get with Time Boss, not trying to shape the number of hours that they work.
I will admit, 10 years ago, back when I was in college, I used to break down like crazy because I had so many classes to take and graduation was coming up and everything that I had to get done was taking a toll on me. Instead of feeling peaceful about it, I was doing the exact opposite. All the things that you said that I shouldn't be doing. I was stressing out. I was having anxiety and losing sleep at night. I was getting angry. That was 10 years ago, but I learned that that is not how I should be handling things. And as a business owner, I've never once felt stressed out or anxious about anything, even when things don't seem to be going well. I know that I can keep things in check and just put that focus on the overall outcome, that the job will get done and the client will be satisfied, and in the end it'll just be a good payday. So that's the type of mindset I try to have. I do try to have the success mindset rather than a stressed out mindset.
I think that's so important, Christian. I totally affirm it. That's great.
And then hopefully other areas of my life will eventually change too. I do want to meet a wife one day. Right now it doesn't look likely it's going to happen, but that's besides the point. In the meantime, I'll just make sure to stay committed to business, ensuring clients are getting served properly, and making sure that I have all my ducks in a row before I even decide to take on any project. I always do my very best to manage my time and make sure that appointments are being met and clients' deadlines are being met, things like that. I never let those things get overlooked. Even when things look like that, I really have to push things to get things out there. In the end, things still end up working out well. And that's just because I don't allow stress and anxiety and anger and depression to consume me when I'm trying to work on major projects. Now, the second habit that you told me about was holding daily review meetings at the last 15 minutes of each day. Please tell us what is reviewed in these meetings and how does this help one keep their calendar organized and its tasks prioritized. Now, I know we've kind of covered that when talking about the first initial meeting, the weekly meetings, but you've also mentioned holding meetings at the last 15 minutes of each day. So these are the daily meetings.
Yeah, great question. Yeah, so if you think about it, as an analogy, if the weekly planning meeting is like the deep clean of your room, the daily review meeting is just making your bed and keeping it tidy. So the daily review meeting is how you really hold that plan together. And my recommendation to people is to do it at the end of the day. The secondary benefit of it is it really helps you kind of emotionally close down the day and then separate from work and then go off and be in the rest of your world. For me, that's being with my kids or being with my family or being in the community, whatever. So 3 key activities that I recommend people do. The first is just to deal with any unfinished tasks. So, You might have calendar tasks that didn't get done. Someone might have walked in with new ideas today that for new projects you need to work on. Client made a new request. Employee might have called with an issue, who knows what. You might have a list of items that you now have from that day that are undone. The key is that you keep them in the system. And so I encourage people either put them back into your calendar. So if you can find time to calendar them this week and you need to do them this week, great. You've got Whirlwind built in your week. So you essentially have this interweek buffer. You could use some of that Whirlwind to schedule those items or put them in your backlog. If you don't need to deal with them until next week, just put them in your backlog, that big list we talked about at the very beginning. And you'll notice the win there is by doing that, the one key place they're not is your head. They are only in your calendar or in your backlog. That's it. There's no other place that those tasks are going to live. And so often we don't do this and we just take tasks home and we feel them all night long. We may be at dinner with the spouse or dinner with friends, and in the back of our head, we're just thinking about those undone tasks. So the goal here is to really close down your day and get those out of your head. Second thing is to reflect on your day. So I'm just a really big believer on reflection. I think it's a powerful backstop. One of the biggest risks of a small business owner is we get into stressful situations and we just keep shoveling and we just shovel faster because we're afraid if we stop shoveling, something will break. And those are moments for me, like even if you take 5 minutes of reflection and look at it and say, okay, what's working, what's not working, what course correction do I need to make? Those are really powerful moments, powerful reflective moments for you to make that slight adjustment for the next day or the next week and put yourself back on a good track. Maybe you were in your email all day long and you were distracted and you didn't get any of your priorities done. A simple course correction might be, you know what, tomorrow I'm going to schedule when I'm going to check my email, or I'm only going to check my email during Whirlwind time, and otherwise I'm going to work on my priorities. That's a great example of a reflective backstop that keeps you from just going off the rails, but kind of keeps you committed to the plan. And then finally, it truly is just committing to the plan. So my recommendation is to look at the calendar for tomorrow, remind yourself of the things you have on the calendar tomorrow, and recommit yourself to those items. Remind yourself why those items are important, why your time boss, you as the time boss, plan that for your future self in the first place. If we don't do these tasks, we hit our revenue goals, or we'll better support our employees, or we'll increase our client satisfaction, whatever it is, just remind yourself of the value of it. Again, oftentimes people will plan and they will fail to follow through because they're not actually committed to that plan. They're not disciplined enough to follow through with it. And so I'm a really big believer on reminding ourselves of the value of those tasks as a way to help our commitment. So we're just doing that for tomorrow's task. If it's end of day Monday, we're looking at Tuesday. And it's those 3 items: deal with any incomplete items, reflect on the day, and then commit to the plan again.
Failing to plan is planning to fail. We've been taught these words pretty much all our lives, and we hear it even more as business owners. And I agree, reflection is a very, very important step to take whenever you complete each day. Some business owners like to reflect by the end of each week, or they do it bi-monthly, or they do it on a quarterly basis, which is long-term reflection. However, if you can at least reflect back on how successful your day went, you'll be able to understand what went well and what needs to be fixed, which areas did not perform so well, which areas underperformed when it came to meeting expectations, and then you can start thinking about what you can do next time to make sure that you have a more successful day, that these tasks get performed on a satisfactory level. So it is important to reflect, otherwise you're just going to be winging it every day, not really knowing what's going to happen. And then when you're winging it, what happens? You end up committing the same mistakes that you just overlooked simply because you failed to reflect back on what happened the day before. And not just the day before, but even previous times where expectations weren't met properly, where you felt things could have been better. That leads me to my last and final question. What is the biggest mistake every business owner, large or small, make when it comes to time management?
I think the biggest mistake they make is they keep too much in their head. And the research shows, University of Oregon did a study that you can only think of 4 things at a time. And so at most, hold 4 thoughts at a time. So we're kind of rapidly cycling through thoughts. And so the mistake that people make is they just don't use a framework or a system like TimeBoss to get it out of their head and have it sit in that system. And the risk is the quality of their work. So if I am sitting down to do a task, like even right now, like you and I, Christian, are having a great interview on this podcast. If I was overwhelmed by my to-do list and everything I had to do today, I might not even take this call, or I might not schedule time for it, or I might be really distracted while you or I are connecting. But because everything is out of my head and in the system, I can be fully present with you and we can have the best conversation possible. And that's true of any task. If I'm working on my 2025 strategic plan, I want to be fully present to that task. The only way I get fully present to that task is if there's nothing else in my head competing for real estate. And so, that first step in the process with the weekly planning meeting, getting everything out of your head and into a list, that alone can be really, really helpful for a business owner. Obviously, I have thoughts about it can also be very overwhelming to see all those things, but but just getting the things out of your head, allowing you to be more focused and present, I think is not doing that. I think is the biggest mistake business owners make in time management.
Yes, I agree. It's important to make sure that we do not overwhelm our minds with too much. And that's not just with tasks, but really with anything. When you have too much crowding your brain all at once, it does cause you to have a mental breakdown. All of a sudden, you just kind of zone out. You don't really focus on anything anymore, even the priorities that are at the top of the list. You start to break down. You feel tired out. You feel fatigue. And in the end, nothing gets done. And that's simply because your mind had too much going on. You lost your sense of direction. You basically get lost. It's like getting lost in a forest. So having a framework like Time Boss is basically a roadmap to help make sure that this never happens. You're able to focus on all the tasks you have prioritized, with the most important ones coming first.
Exactly. Yep, that's well said, Christian. That was a really good summary.
At this time, I would like to go ahead and close out the show. Before I do, Andrew, is there anything else that you would like to talk to us about that we did not discuss or cover?
The one thing I would say for small business owners, and I think this is consistent with your question earlier, Christian, is that our calendars, you look back at your calendar last week, and let's say you could actually go back and represent what was on your calendar. Your calendar is the real-time expression of your goals and values. And I think it's important for us as business owners to take ownership of that and say, just like our bank account is. Our bank account is a true representation of our goals and values. It shows us what we actually value by what we spend time on. And so I think time is really a critical currency like that. And so I think it behooves any small business owner to be reflective and say, does my calendar reflect my goals and values? And if it doesn't, you should do something about it. And if it does, keep going. Like, I am rooting for your success. I am in it with you. I want us all to be successful. But if it's not, I just would encourage you to do something about it. Take a next step. I think that's the key.
Very well said, Andrew. I agree with that entire statement. That, again, that just stresses the importance of reflection. Not only reflect on how well your day went, but also reflect on how your calendar is filling up. Reflect on what transactions are being done in your bank account. Are they in line with each other, I guess you could say. But yes, thank you once again for coming on the show, Andrew. I encourage all of our listeners to go check out Time Boss at timeboss, that's timeboss.us, to learn more about this wonderful time management framework that will help save you from destroying your own success due to a lack of time management. If you don't have time management, you will get lost. You will not know which direction to go in. And in the end, you will end up failing as a business owner. Your clients will not be pleased. All of your projects will not get done. So it's important to make sure that you always have a sense of direction in time management and making sure that each day is planned out well. All of your tasks are getting accomplished. And in the end, it results in great rewards for you at the end of every day and every week. Thank you, Andrew, for coming on the show. It was a pleasure. We hope to have you on future episodes of BizCast to talk more about time management hacks that all the small business owners can learn from.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Christian. Really great to be here. Appreciate your time.